جلوی آینه خودمو میبینم خیلی تغییر کردم جدی جدی با روزه های تو خودمو پیر کردم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the fifth majlis in this series of majalis in which we are commemorating the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada along with his companions that gave their lives for the sake of Islam, for the sake of securing the religion of the Holy Prophet. We began the discussions under the topic of lessons from Ashura. And I've been reciting these verses from Quran every night. And we've been discussing briefly as far as the tafsir of these ayat are concerned. Every day we touch upon a little portion of these ayat so that we have touched upon them and we have learned and discussed the nature and the purpose behind these ayat. We look at that these ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed in the 89th chapter from the Holy Quran, last four verses, which are applicable, and the implementation is to Imam Hussain. Because nafs mutma'in is something which all of us look after. You know, there are different types of nufus that are mentioned in Quran. And nafs is a very ambiguous discussion. If I was to take up on this discussion, I may not be able to do justice as far as what this nafs really means. But what we have gathered from the ayat of Quran and the traditions of the Holy Prophet and Masumin, we understand that nafs is sometimes reflected as the halat and the condition upon our ruh. So insan is made of two things. First is the body of insan, and the second is the ruh and the soul of insan. These are the two elements in the creation of mankind. Now nafs has to do with the ruh of insan, not with the jism of insan. That's why Allah did not say Ya ayyatuhal jismul mutma'inna. He said Ya ayyatuhal nafsul mutma'inna. So this nafs is sometimes scholars of akhlaq mention that it is a different and a separate entity along with the body, the soul, and nafs. Some mention no, body and soul are the two entities, and nafs is the halat of the second entity, which is the ruh. So how is your ruh? What is the halat of your ruh? It depends on this nafs. So for example, if your body is sound and healthy, you know, you call that person to be a healthy individual. But if someone is frailing and weak and elderly, you know, they're not so much healthy, they're weak. Different halat and the conditions of our physical body, similarly, there are different halat and the conditions of our spiritual body, which is the soul. So with that said, nafs sometimes could be the nafs which is mentioned in Quran as nafs ammara, the one which is the controlling, egoistic nafs of ours that commands us, that tells us to do certain things. And similarly, we find that there's a nafs which is called nafs lawwama. Lawwama comes from, you know, lawm, which means to blame, which means to, you know, scold someone. Lawmatul la'im, as we have referred to or read in many of the du'as, that even in Quran, when shaitan will be, in the day of judgment, when we will be presented in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our case will be heard. Shaitan will be present there. And shaitan will say, فَلَا تَلُومُونِي لُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't blame me, blame yourselves for what you have done. He said, I called you and Allah called you. The difference is you said labbaik to my call and you did not say labbaik to the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So فَلَا تَلُومُونِي لُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't blame me for your wretched state that you became sinful and whatnot. Blame yourselves because you listened to my call and you failed to respond to the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even then, he will be backing away because he was misguiding you in this world. So from this aspect, we see that nafs is lawama, the one which is reproaching, the one which is, feeling reproach, and the one which blames and tells you that this is wrong or this is right. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this ability, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, that Allah has given this nafs ilham. Now some people count this to be the third category of nafs, which is nafs mulhima, the one which receives the inspiration, ilham from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as mentioned in Surah Wash-Shamsi wa Duhaha. After 11 qasams and the oaths, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. We taught this nafs, we gave inspiration to this nafs, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Fujur, which is, of course, bad, and taqwa, which is piety, which is good. We taught it what is good and what is bad. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاءَ. Of the one which, polluted itself. Indeed, it's wronged itself and it was polluted and it went bad. And the one which وَمَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا زَكَّاهَا, and the one which purified itself. I'm forgetting the ayat. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The one who found salvation, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ, is successful, is the one that purified the nafs. وَمَنْ خَابَ وَخَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And wretched is the one who polluted and corrupted this nafs. So we see that these are the three forms that are mentioned in Quran: nafs ammara, nafs lawwama, and nafs mulhima. And then comes this fourth form, which is mentioned in this ayat of Surah Fajr, which says, Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna. Oh, the serene soul. We all are looking for the state of our nafs to be in what? In serenity. We're all looking for the state of our nafs to be in the state where it is satisfied, and not in the state of reproaching, not in the state of blaming, rather in the state where we have been given commands by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know the right from wrong, and therefore we want to be at the state of itminan. And that's why there are many examples of this itminan that we have given. We mentioned how a lot of time we try to satisfy ourselves with the worldly things, but because world is a temporary abode, definitely things that we find in it will be of the temporary nature, and they will expire. But if you look for the solutions which are outwardly, then therefore they will remain with you. And so one of the ways of finding this itminan, and this is just repeating what I had mentioned last night, is how do we get to this nafs mutma'inna? Doesn't everyone want to have this nafs mutma'inna? We do. How do we gain this itminan nafs? Well, we gain this itminan nafs by, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask him, he says, Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Indeed, with the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hearts find what? Itminan. They get itminan qalb. And then we asked a further question from Allah. Oh Allah, how do we do your dhikr? He said, Aqimis salata li dhikri. Establish the prayer. That is the best form of doing my dhikr. Now I have a question for you. That, in Quran, we have this ayat which is talking about that these souls, which then when remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what happens to you? So the question is, when you do the dhikr of Allah, what kind of reaction does it have in you? Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel good about it? How have you felt after, for example, fasted the entire day? How have you felt after having fasted for the entire month? How have you felt when you perform Salatul Layl consistently? How do you feel when you, for example, perform Umrah or Hajj? How do you feel after having done some sort of ibadat? And then how have you felt when you have failed to perform the obligation? Two scenarios, right? Definitely, everyone will agree, hopefully, that when we have done good, we feel good about ourselves. But when we have done or missed something, we feel bad about ourselves. You feel within yourself, someone is scolding you. That la'im, or that nafs lawama kicks in. It blames you. Why did you miss Salatul Fajr? Why did you miss, for example, fast? Why did you break your fast, for example? Why did you, for example, perform that action which is forbidden? For example, why did you lie? Why did you backbite? Why did you, because these are some of the actions that we do and we don't even realize it, right? Salat, you miss it, you realize it, right? Nobody really misses Salat and then not realize it. But a lot of time we do things that we don't even realize that we have done it. For example, we do ghibat, we backbite, we gossip, we lie, we slander people, and we don't even realize it. Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, he was sitting with his companions, Hawariyun, disciples, and he spoke to them and he said to them that imagine if you were, if you were to see one of your brothers sleeping while some of their body parts were exposed. So for example, although it's makruh to sleep in a masjid, but when you go for Umrah or Hajj, instead of going to your hotel, you want to stick in the haram. You spend as much time in the haram. Or when you go for the ziyarat of Imam Hussain, Sayyid al-Shuhada, or other Masumin, you take a small nap inside the haram. Imagine if you were sleeping and some of your body parts were exposed. Hazrat Isa ﷺ said, imagine if you were passing by and you saw one of your brothers and some of his body parts and private body parts were exposed. What would you do? Right away, everyone has responded unanimously that we will cover it. We don't want our brothers' body parts to be exposed when they're sleeping, because they don't know when they're sleeping, right? Insan does not have taklif. They're not mukallaf when they're sleeping. So they don't know that their body part is exposed because they're sleeping. So what we will do, we will go ahead and cover it. No doubt about it. Hazrat Isa ﷺ said, no, not only that you won't cover it, but you will expose them even further. Right away, all of these companions says, Hasha, no way, that's not possible. And then they realized that Hazrat Isa ﷺ was setting an example. He did not mean literally that if you went past your brother who was exposed, laying somewhere sleeping, that of course you will cover him. But Hazrat Isa was giving an analogy that what if you hear a secret about your brother, about your sister, about your friend? What do you do with that secret? Do you cover it or do you expose it further? Then they realize that no, we actually go ahead and expose it further. When we hear a secret of someone says, keep this secret of mine, don't tell anyone. The first nature is to go ahead and tell someone else. So here we find that Hazrat Isa ﷺ is telling these people that this is the human tendency to go ahead and expose people even further. So coming back to my point, that this itminan, what has happened to you when you perform the ibadat of Allah, when you do an action which is praiseworthy, you feel good inside, not becoming too conceited that you've done such a good action and my God, I'm so muttaqi and parhezgar and whatnot. No, being modest, you feel good within yourself. But when you, na'udhu do something wrong, you have this nafs which tells you that you have done something which is terribly wrong. So this nafs right there is condemning you every step of the way. So from here we understand the concept of how nafs is mentioned in Quran. Again, that is not my discussion and not my topic, but because I'm reciting these ayat from Surah Fajr every night, we're doing a little bit of tafsir of the words that are appeared in this ayah. Now coming to our discussion. In the last 2 nights, we had talked about Tawheed, we've talked about Ma'ad, in the Kalam of Imam Hussain, under the topic of lessons from Ashura. Now there are 4 other discussions under this first topic of belief. We've covered Ma'ad, we've covered Tawheed. So there remains Adalat, there remains Nubuwat, there remains Imamat. Along with Risalat and Imamat, there's Shafa'at, and then there's eradication of the innovation. I believe that is a very important subject, but because of the brevity of the days that I have left, I will skip it. And inshallah, I will try and incorporate them in every day's lecture, because that is something which is very, very important for us to discuss. The eradication of innovations. Sometimes we innovate things. When we innovate things, this is, where the concept of bid'at comes into play. Now, we're not talking about those who are Wahhabis who call everything to be bid'at. For them, everything is bid'at. They say, well, that did not exist in the time of the Holy Prophet, is bid'at. So by that formula, even you and I are bid'at, because we did not exist in the time of the Holy Prophet. That's not what the concept and the explanation of bid'at is. Bid'ah, or innovation, means in Islam, that's something which is not, or that's something that we introduce today and incorporate that into religion, saying that this is religiously, this is something which is part of religion. This is something which is part of our furu'adeen. When we go ahead and do such a thing, that is called innovation, and that is called bid'at. What have we done to incorporate something in the ibadat? Have we introduced a new ibadat? Well, you say, well, you call this azadari to be ibadat. Yeah, not in the wajib sense. So for example, if someone doesn't perform this azadari in the way that we perform it, yes, they're missing out on a great opportunity to earn a great thawab and to, of course, commemorate this greatest tragedy. Had they known the importance of this great tragedy, they would have done the same thing. But we do not say, well, this all that we do, these 10 nights of ibadat, or the speeches and eulogies and the marsiya and roza khani and all of these things, we don't put a label upon it as wajib, that these are wajibat that you have to perform, like the wajib that you have 5 times a day, like the wajib that you have in the month of Ramadan, like the wajib that you have as far as your zakat and khums is concerned. We don't do that. When we don't do that, that means we are not considering this to be, an obligatory ibadat, a ibadat which is wajib. So that's the concept of innovations that people had as far as some of our practices are concerned. A lot of time things have to do within this culture of azadari, because we come from different backgrounds. You come from Iran or Afghanistan. I come from Pakistan. My ancestors from India, Hind. Some of our Shia brothers are from Iraq, and even Saudi Arabia and Yemen and other Syria and other Muslim countries. All of these Muslim countries, Shia countries, where Shias come from, they have their own way of commemorating the azab Sayyid al-Shuhada. They have their own way of doing individual acts in the azab Sayyid al-Shuhada. For example, let's just take this matam. The matam that we strike our chest, that is something which is same in all of our cultures. People from India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, other countries, they all have this matam that they do with their hand. Why? Because this is close to your fitrat, your nature, your tabi'at, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, that if we ever, and you don't have to be a Muslim, if we ever feel or suffer some sort of calamity, we raise our hands to our chest and we beat our chest. We do this action. So this is the natural instinct of humankind. Therefore, you find this to be same in all of the countries. But then you find that there are specific ways of doing matam in different cultures. You come from the Afghanistani culture, you come from the Iranian culture. They're one way of doing for example, matam. But there's another way of doing it in Pakistan and India. And within our Pakistan and India, there are different places, there are different ways of doing it within themselves, which is sometimes surprising to us. So when you find these differences, that tells you what? That this is not, part of the Islamic culture. Rather, it is part of our background, that where we come from. Because if it was part of the Islamic culture, then everyone would be aware of it. Everyone will be doing it in the same exact way. The fact that everyone, I don't even know how you perform matam in, for example, in your culture. That means it's not something which is a standard. A standard is only that which we have come to know as human nature and what has been taught to us by Imam Masoom. So these are some of the things that I thought, inshallah, I will bring in as far as the discussion of eradication of innovations are concerned. So therefore, we move our attention toward the second section under the topic of lessons from Ashura, the lessons of ethics and morality. Yes, we look at that akhlaq is one of the three dimensions of Islam. If someone was to ask you, what is deen? What is the explanation of deen? You say, well, triple A. What are these three A's? First A is for aqaid, your belief system. Second A is for ahkam, your do's and don'ts. And third A is for akhlaq, your ethics and morality. Now you could be a scholar in aqaid, and you could be a scholar and faqih in ahkam, marja taqlid. But if you're lacking akhlaq, then the first two are, superficially there. Nobody will be attracted to you. This akhlaq is very important. Why? Because Prophet was saying, Inni bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq. One of the purposes behind Prophet is sent to us is to display the peak of akhlaq and the best of the morals. Innaka la'ala khuluqin azim. O Prophet, you are at the highest standard of morality. And so losing this concept and not having good morals and ethics, it would have been a case that people would have stranded the Holy Prophet. لَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَنْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. O Prophet, if you were stern-hearted, if you were strong in your dealings with the people, and if you were not, as we made you to be merciful, rahmatan lil alameen, then people would have left you a long time ago. The fact that people are still with you is because you are soft-hearted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he tells Hazrat Musa alayhi wasalam to go speak to Fir'aun, Hazrat Musa says, give me my wazir, who's better as far as his speech is concerned, Hazrat Harun. So both are ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to go and speak to Fir'aun. But Allah commands them. Speak to him how? In a very harsh manner? No. Qawlan layyanan. Layyan means mulaim. Layyan means very delicate. Layyan means softly, gently. Why would I speak to? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling Hazrat Musa alayhi to speak to Fir'aun in a gentle manner? What is there about gentle what is gentle about Fir'aun? Nothing. He wants to kill Hazrat Musa. But still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding his prophet that even if you speak to your arch enemy, you speak to them in a gentle manner. So this is part of the morality that Islam teaches us. There's so many things under this subject. I mean, if we just talk about the lessons of Ashura pertaining to ethics and morals, we'd be looking at about 10, 15 different topics, from freedom, from sacrifice, from honoring mankind, doing tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, complete reliance upon him, jihad bin nafs, bravery, valor, sabr, patience, and steadfastness, ifaf, hijab, modesty, loyalty, wafa. All of these are what? Different manifestations of morality and ethics that we derive or can derive from the Ashura and from the Kalam of Imam Hussain. So, there are threefold dimensions of deen, which I mentioned. One is aqaid, ahkam, and akhlaq. Who do we learn akhlaq from? We learn it from the Prophet and we learn it from Imams. All of these stories that you find in Quran. What are these stories? The purpose behind these stories. Quran is not a storybook. Quran is definitely not a novel, which is, telling you stories and, stories of the previous Anbiya. Although majority of the chunk of these discussions in Quran is talking about the stories of the previous Anbiya. Hazrat Adam, his story is mentioned in depth and detail. How he lived in Jannat and how he was enjoying his life, then how Shaitan penetrated and how him and his wife were sent to the world, and the entire story of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he created Hazrat Adam, he asked the angels to prostrate and bow in front of him. Then you look at the story of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, that how Hazrat Nuh spent 950 years with his community building this ark, and he took every single pair with him on his boat, on his ship, and he could not bring about his son and his own wife. They drowned in this great tufan that came. So the story of Hazrat Nuh has been mentioned in depth. The story of Hazrat Ibrahim and his son Hazrat Ismail and Ishaq and the two wives, Sarah and Hajar, are mentioned in Quran in great length and detail. There's an entire chapter called Ibrahim. The story of Hazrat Musa, which is the most talked about story in Quran. Majority of the discussions in reference to a prophet is to Hazrat Musa. The entire chapter of Surah Qasas, from the beginning till the end, is talking about Hazrat Musa's lifestyle. From the time he's born, how his mother is told, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَى, to the time that she's asked, أَلْقِيهِ فِي الْيَمِّ, and وَلَا تَخَافِي وَلَا تَحْزَنِي إِنَّ رَادُّهُ إِلَيْكَ, put him into this basket and let him be, and we will return him back to you. The story of how Hazrat Musa arrives at the banks of the river, which ends in the house of Pharaoh, and Hazrat Asiya there, of course, she says, let him be qurratu ayun, let him be the delight of our eyes. We might make him as our son and we might raise him, because they did not have any children of their own. So this entire story of how Hazrat Musa grows up in the house of Pharaoh, and then he flees. And he flees to, out of Misr, goes to Madian, gets married to the daughter of Hazrat Shu'aib, then returns back. And Allah tells him to speak to Pharaoh, qawlan layyina. The story of Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. Length is mentioned from the time his mother felt the labor pain. She goes away, then she returns. Allah tells her, don't say anything. Let people talk. Let people talk. Let Isa talk. And so she points towards Hazrat Isa. Let them say what they want to say about you. Don't. Right away, these people were saying and blaming Hazrat Maryam salamullah alayha of her chastity and modesty. That, Ya Maryam, ma kana abuka imra sawin, wa ma kana ummuki baghiya. Your father was not a bad person. Your mother was not, a rebellious person. What have you brought? Asharat ilay. So she pointed toward Hazrat Isa. He spoke in the cradle of the mother. Inni Abdullah atani al-kitab wa ja'alani nabiyya, and so on and so forth. So his discussion. And then Hazrat Yusuf, the entire chapter, Surah Yusuf, from the beginning till the end, the envy and the jealousy of his brothers, and how he sees a dream. Inni ra'aytu ahda ashara kawkaban, that they're doing sajda to him. And then the implementation and the end of his dream that was fulfilled in the form that he was selected as he was one of the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the story has so many akhlaqi, points in it. Why? The reason behind all of these stories, from Hazrat Adam to our Prophet, the reason behind all of these stories in Quran, because Quran is not a storybook, is rather to teach us akhlaq. Because at one point I can tell and sit here and talk about akhlaqiyat from, philosophical way or from the kalam of the scholars who have, for that you can go ahead and read books like Miraj al-Sa'ada, Mullah Ahmad Naraqi. You can go ahead and read Felicities of the Soul, or the ways of attaining prosperity, Chail Hadith, different books of akhlaq. There's one way of reading akhlaq, and one way of implementing this akhlaq by looking at and studying the lives of Anbiya and of course the Ma'sumin. So that's what Quran has, the lives of Anbiya in it. The purpose behind this is to teach us what? Akhlaq, to better our morality. So read Quran next time when you're reading Surah Yusuf. Read it from the aspect of learning morality from it. Not so much, the fascinating story of Hazrat Yusuf. You watch the entire movie that is made on Hazrat Yusuf. Luckily, it's made in your own language, so you know how to, you watched it. But look at the akhlaqiyat that could be drawn from that movie, from the story of Hazrat Yusuf. Some of the life examples that are mentioned in it. That how Hazrat Yusuf preferred jail and prison over committing sin. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned لِيَصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْعَذَابِ. We turned evil away from Yusuf. Someone who's trying to commit sin, regardless of how protective they are of committing this sin. If Allah wants to expose them, Allah exposes them. Zulaykha وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ, not أغلق, غَلَّ. أغلقت nika. They didn't say أغلقت, rather it said غَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. There's a difference between the two. غَلَّقَ means with muhkam bast, with authority. And not just one, abwab, 7 doors. And she wanted to commit that crime behind 7 doors so nobody finds out. But it was Allah's intention that everybody finds out. So Allah opened the doors. And all these stories. So look at these stories from the aspect of akhlaq and ethics and morality. Again, I can go on and on in reference to the stories that are mentioned in the Quran, but I will be drifting away from my topic. So Ashura is a complete manifestation of akhlaq Hussaini. Issues such as freedom, patience, preferring others, ithar, fulfilling the vow, honor, bravery, tawakkul, seeking God's pleasure. Why were they doing this? They were doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sympathy are some of the examples of akhlaqi lessons that we can derive from Ashura. So tonight, in the brief time that I have left in my possession, I'll only be able to discuss 2. Freedom and ithar. Inshallah, let's see if we can get to these 2. Freedom, it's a trait everyone holds dear, but has different understanding of it. Freedom means being free from everyone except Allah. You want to be slave of Allah, but you don't want to be slave of anyone. You'd rather suffer than be living in slavery. You'd rather be free and go about your business with open mind and freedom of doing what you want to do than be living, for example, under someone's commands and living under someone's rule. That's why all of these nations, they bought their freedom. They had to fight to get free. The date of the freedom of this country, that they became azad. This azadi is very dear to us. We'd rather suffer than compromise on our azadi. But we want to be free from everyone except what? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to be abid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to be slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember that story in the time of 7th Imam. There was a person by the name Bishr Hafi. And Hafi, barefoot, became barefoot. He is known for that. Because one day, 7th Imam, Imam Hussain was passing by a street. And he heard from a door, as he was passing by that door, the sound of music was coming. Imam stopped and he knocked on the door. This is the duty of Imam, Amr bil Maruf, Nahi anil Munkar. And then after a while, a Kanis came and she opened the door. Imam said, Is the owner of the house a free man or is a slave? He said, my owner is a free man. Imam said, I wish he was a slave. And Imam walked away. When this lady, she went back inside, her master said, who was at the door? She said, there was a man who inquired if you were free or a slave. I said, you were a free man. He said, I wish that man was a slave. Bishr understood who was at the door. He ran barefoot after Imam, apologizing for the sin and the crime that he was committing of music in his house, and he asked for the forgiveness. What did Imam say to him? And what did he understand? He said, be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't be a slave of the world. You are being slave of the world when you are going against the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our relation with world, wealth, nation, status, and children in the path of freedom are all obstacles. You know, all of these things, there's so many obstacles that get in the way of our absolute freedom and being absolute slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our captivity in front of our desires and materialism is a sign of weakness of our will and conviction. You know, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, he said, Ala hurrun yada'u hadhihi al-lumadhata li'ahliha innahu laysa li'anfusikum tamanun illa al-jannah fala tabi'uha illa biha. This is how Imam is looking at this world. Could there be more disgrace to the world? How Imam explained it? Ala hurrun yada'u hadhihi al-lumadha. Ajib is this, you know, hikayat from our Mawlana Muttaqin. He said, is there no free man who can leave this chewed morsel? Hadil lumadha. You know, when you chew something, for example, you took a bite of a sandwich and you chewed it, instead of eating it, you spit it out. Now, when you spit out that chewed food from your mouth, you know, for example, you didn't like the taste, or it was too spicy, you couldn't eat it, so you threw it out. Do you think anyone will pick it up and eat it? In fact, you yourself won't eat it again because you had it in your mouth, but you chewed it out and you threw it away. When you yourself won't eat that which you have thrown away and spit out of your mouth and chewed food, let alone anyone else. So Imam is comparing this world. He says, is there no free man who can leave this chewed morsel? That means this world. This world in the sight of Amir al-Mu'mineen is like a chewed upon morsel. To those who like it, certainly the only price for your souls is paradise. Therefore, do not sell your souls except for paradise. That is the ultimate freedom. That free of the world, but be slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We give in so easily for the sake of others, right? So right away we give in to the demands of others. Someone asks us something, right away we say, okay, sure, why not? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Tawbah, this ayat itself, ayat number 24, is a very comprehensive ayat. You know, just like those ayat of Surah Zilzal that I mentioned the other day. A person came to the Prophet, he said, I want to learn Quran. Prophet said to one of his companions, teach him Quran. He recited Surah Zilzal. And the last two ayat, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرٍ يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرٍّ يَرَى. The man said, that's enough, and he walked away. Prophet said, رَجَعَ فَقِيهًا. He returned a knowledgeable faqih. This ayat is the same way. If you pay heed to it, if you pay attention to it. Surah Tawbah, ayat number 24. I won't explain the entire ayat, but I'm giving you the reference. So inshallah, you are Ahl Ilm, and you will do just a little bit of research. You know, today, you don't need to have a library of hundreds and thousands of books of, you know, tafsir and whatnot. All of these things are now available in your fingertips. You, same internet, same online, you go to Google, you search, you know, you go to various Islamic websites and you will find the tafsir. You'll find, you know, the explanation of the ayat. So you don't have any excuse today that you're deprived of knowledge. No, knowledge is in your fingertips. So look up this ayat number 24 of Surah Tawbah. What is it? I'll read it. قل إن كان آباؤكم وأبناؤكم وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم وأموال اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله. Yes. Prophet counts how many things? In kana, if abaukum, your forefathers, your ajdad, your children abnaukum, your brothers ikhwanukum, your wives and the women in your family, wa azwajukum, wa ashiratukum, and your extended family members, wa andir ashiratak al aqrabin, right? Prophet invited his family for that da'watul ashira. These are the people, your fathers, your children, your brothers, your wives, your spouses. In other words, azwaj means your spouses, and ashira, your family. Wa amwalun iqtaraftumuha, the wealth that you have accumulated. Tijaratun takhshawna kasadaha, the business that you sometimes fear the nature of it, maybe loss and maybe profit in it. Wa masakinun tardawnaha, and the places where you live, which are to your liking. Ahabba ilaykum, if these 5 or 7 or 8 things, I didn't count: fathers, children, akhwan, azwaj, ashira, amwal, tijara, and masakin. 8 things that Allah is counting, and there are so many other things that fall under these categories. Ahabba ilaykum min Allahi wa rasulihi, this is the point, are more beloved to you than Allah and his prophet, and struggle in the way of Allah. 3 things. If all of these 8 things are more beloved to you, you prefer them over what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means command of Allah. Rasul, that means the commands of the Rasul, his obedience. Wa jihad fi sabilihi, that means being ready and struggling in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fatarabbasu. This is the response. If all of these things are your liking, you love them, then wait for the command of Allah. Fatarabbasu hatta yati Allahu bi amrihi wallahu la yahdi al-qawm al-fasiqin. I can't explain more than this. Inshallah, I'll trust your understanding of it and your further research on it. So freedom is where insan can recognize his honor, his nobility, and not give into disgrace, not despised. Imam Hussain, and that's why in Karbala we find, how does he explain azadi? How does he explain freedom? He said, Mawtun fi izzin khayrun min hayatin fi dhullin. Such a beautiful saying. In fact, write this saying and hang it in your house with golden words, right? Mawtun fi izzin, death with honor, with izzat. Khayrun, is better. Min hayatin, than that life fi dhullin, which is in disgrace. So I'd rather prefer maut while I still have my honor and dignity than a life which is filled with humiliation. That's what slavery is. You don't want to be humiliated. You don't want to be slaves of anyone else. The moment you become slave of this world, you become humiliated. Dhalil, as the ayat is saying, or the hadith of Imam is saying. But izzat is given when you prefer death with freedom to do what you want to do. So Imam preferred death over paying allegiance to Yazid. His logic is, La wallahi, la u'tikum biyadi i'ta' al-dhalil, wa la uqirru lakum iqrar al-abid. I will not give hand to disgrace and will not be submissive to their rule like a slave. Imam is making it very clear. He uses the word abid. La wallahi la utikum biyadi ata al-dhalil. I will not give my hand in disgrace. Wala uqirru lakum iqrar al-abid. And I will not be submissive, just like someone is submissive as a slave to someone who's their master. These temporary masters are masters today and they'll be slaves tomorrow. So I don't want to give my hand into disgrace like this. So when fighting on the day of Ashura, when attacking the enemy, Imam continuously uttered these words. And again, all of these words are such remarkable, mind-blowing pieces of wisdom, pearls of wisdom that require maybe someone, write it down beautifully with khattati, hang it in your house everywhere. When you look at it, it reminds you of Sayyid al-Shuhada and what he's saying. He says, Al-mawtu awla min rukub al-ar. Death is better than disgrace, living in disgrace. I'd rather die than be humiliated and live in disgrace. All those people who were telling Imam, don't go. Some were well-wishers, but some were saying because, for other political reasons. Some people actually told Imam that, don't be cause of fitna in the society. Just give allegiance to Yazid. Imam is saying death is better than disgrace. And disgrace is better than entering hellfire. Al-mawtu awla min rukub al-ar wal-aru awla min dukhul an-nar. People said, well, no, don't go. Why are you going? Why are you not giving in like everyone else has? Why are you putting yourself and your life in danger as well as your family members' life in danger? Imam responded. He said, Ala wa inna ad-da'iya ibn ad-da'i qad rakazani bayna ithnatayn. The son of so-and-so has indeed put me between given me two choices. Bayna sillati wa dhillati wa hayhat min dhillah. You've heard of this. That the son of that person has given me two choices. Either I take up the weapon in my hand and I fight, or I face zillat, humility, and hayhat min dhillah. And by God, Hussein does not prefer any type of dhillah. This is freedom, brothers and sisters. That Imam ﷺ is trying to tell us that I would rather die, although death is painful, but I would rather die except of being in the state of freedom. He said, Aqsamtu la uqtalu illa hurra. Although death is painful, but I vowed not to die except in the state of freedom. Abdullah, son of Muslim, said the same exact thing, which shows the uniformity in the thinking of those people who are along with Imam ﷺ. Unfortunately, I will not get to the second portion of Ithar, and I will try and conclude over here with the Rabt of Masaib. That Hur, after he was breathing his last breaths, he came to his help. Imam came to his help. And Imam ﷺ said to him, Anta hurrun kama sammatka ummuka, wa anta hurrun fid dunya, wa anta hurrun fil akhirah. Oh Hur, you are isme ba musamma. That means what? Anta hurrun kama sammatka ummuka. The same way that your mother has named you Hur, you are Hur in this life and you are free in the hereafter. The story of Hazrat Hur is also very fascinating. That how someone who's setting his foot out to go ahead and capture Imam Hussain, who's an army chief of Ibn Ziyad, with orders from Ibn Ziyad to go ahead and catch Imam Hussain and bring him to Ibn Ziyad. But because there was goodness in him, he was receptive of the words and the kalam of Imam Hussain. Hur, he said, when I was leaving Kufa, I heard a voice from the back. Someone said, Hur, glad tidings, basharat, barai jannat, barai bahisht. Oh Hur, glad tidings for paradise. He turned around, he didn't see anyone. He said, what paradise? I'm going to capture son of Fatima Zahra, and you're saying glad tidings? What glad tidings? If anything, this is something which, so Hur already knows this, what he's about to do and he's embarking on, there's something wrong with it. But he goes along because this is what he's been commanded to do. He's the warrior. When he stops Imam Hussain, probably the place was Dhu Hasam, his army and his men, 1,000 men, were entirely thirsty. They were dying out of thirst. Imam ﷺ gave water to every single one of them. And then when he had given water to all of them, and when he had fed even the animals that Hur had and his companions had, Imam ﷺ decided to go. Hur grabbed the reins of the horse of Imam and he said, "Oh Hussein, I cannot let you go." Imam said to him, "Taqulatki ummuki ya Hur." May your mother sit in your grief, O Hur. This sentence is uttered when you wish death for someone in Arab world. Hur heard this, that Imam Hussain said, "May your mother sit in your grief," that means death upon you. Hur responded by saying, "Only if your mother was not Fatmatul Zahra." The fact that your mother is Fatmatul Zahra, I can't say and duplicate and repeat the same things you just said to me. Imam knows this sahm that he's throwing towards Hur will be receptive. He will have an effect of it. And then Imam said, "Oh Hur, go ahead and do your salat and we'll do ours." He said, "No, as long as you're here, I will pray behind you." All of these are means for Imam to show Hur the reality. You know, Imam attracted many people, attacked in a sense that he attacked them, but he attracted them by different kalams of his. You know, he invited many people. He invited person by the name Ubaidullah ibn Hurr Juhfi, and that person did not respond to Imam's call. He said, "Take my weapons and take my resources. I don't want to be caught between this, infighting between the Muslims." Imam said, "I don't need your weapons. I'm giving you najat. I'm offering you salvation and you're denying it? Go away. Because the moment I raise the istighasa and I say, Hal minna nasirin yansuruna, and you don't respond and by saying labbaik, then you will have khusran fi dunya wal akhirah." And then there's someone like Hur that Imam is constantly giving these opportunities. And that's why on the night of Ashur, Hur was trembling, shaking. And when he was shaking and he was trembling, Hur, said to himself, "Ukhayyiru, I can choose between paradise and Jahannam and hell." One of the onlookers saw Hur in this state, so feeble, so weak. He said, "Oh Hur, if someone asked me that who is the biggest warrior in all of Kufa, I would say definitely it's Hur. But what is wrong with you? I see that you're weak." He said, "I see myself between Jahannam and paradise." And then he makes his way to the tents of Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain says to Qamar Bani Hashim, Abul Fadl Abbas, "Oh Abbas, look, a guest is approaching." Who was this guest? This was Hur. Hur arrives and he throws himself into the feet of Imam Hussain, asking and begging for forgiveness. "Ya Aba Abdullah, can there be a tawbah for me? Is there a tawbah for me as well?" Imam said, "Oh Hur, raise your head. You are our guest, and it is against the hospitality of this khandan, this family, to treat someone like this." Hur said, "Imam, I am the reason that you are here today. I am the reason who blocked your way when you could have turned around and gone back. I am the reason your children are here and they're thirsty. I am the reason that the water was shut down on you. I am the reason that your ladies and the women are here in this desert. Is there any tawbah for me?" Imam said, "Yes, Hur, there's tawbah for you as well." Hur said, "I want to be the first one to give my life and sacrifice for you." Imam said, "It is against the adab of hospitality to let the guest go." Hur sends his son Bukair towards the battlefield. Bukair goes, gets martyred. Hur gets up after hearing the call of his son to go ahead and protect him and pick up his body parts. Imam Hussain says, "Oh Hur, where are you going?" He says, "My son just called me." He said, "Oh my father, last salam on to you. I'm going to get my son. Imam Hussain said, oh Hur, we will not be able to bear the pain of your young son. Let me handle this. Imam goes, picks up the body of Hur's son Bukair. I would say, oh Mawla, here you did not let Hur go, but today, later on, when your own son Adi Akbar will be martyred, how will you pick up his body? Ajrukum Allah. May Allah give you no grief and no sorrow except the grief of Ahlul Bayt. And then Hur asks the permission. Imam gives him the permission. He goes out and he shows his valor and his bravery. And upon the time when he was struck with this blow on his head, when he was struck, he fell to the ground. Imam went for his help to pick him up. Hur was dead, but there was blood gushing out. Blood was gushing out of the head of Hur. Imam took out the handkerchief that was made by Fatimatul Zahra, placed on the forehead of Hur to stop the bleeding. I would say, oh Hur, how lucky are you that a moment ago you were in the plains in the command of Umar Azad. Now you are enjoying your place in paradise. ألا لعنة الله القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.
بازت هست به موهای سفید سرم چقدر انسان از گذشته شکست بترم